I knew something was off the moment I saw Rick standing at the whiteboard. He was drawing circles around systems he clearly didn't understand, smiling like he'd just discovered fire. Legacy bloat, he called it. My system. 25 years of duct tape, late nights, and sheer stubbornness holding together a Frankenstein backend. And this neon-shirt MBA thought he could swap it out for some plug-and-play cloud package he probably heard about at a TED Talk. He'd been with the company for 3 weeks. I stayed at my desk, the same one I'd had since the dial-up days, pretending to debug a cron job while he walked the new hires through what he proudly called our modernization plan. He skipped every acronym he couldn't pronounce. No mention of the disaster recovery setup I built during the ransomware scare in 2013, the one that kept us alive after 3 straight sleepless nights. No credit for the database sharding I rolled out after our first traffic spike knocked us offline so hard we made the local news. Just a clean, confident X through everything I'd ever touched. Before I keep going, let me ask you something. If this story's already pulling you in, and if you've ever been brushed aside by someone with more confidence than competence, do me a favor. Like the video and hit subscribe. It really does help the team keep bringing stories like this to light. Alright, back to the punch in the gut. I didn't always look like someone who could design system architecture in her sleep. I was the quiet one. The old guard. The woman you'd walk past without a second glance. I didn't raise my voice, but when something broke, somehow I always had the fix. People used to call me Firewall Fiona behind my back. It started as a joke, right up until our main firewall vendor collapsed mid-quarter, and I kept the entire East Coast cluster running with a few scripts and more Red Bull than I care to admit. That was back when leadership actually understood what it took to keep this place running, what it cost, and who paid that cost. That was before the consultants showed up. Before the HR deck started throwing around phrases like culture alignment and flattened hierarchy. Before my weekly ops check-ins were cut down to 10 minutes and shoved to Fridays, assuming they happened at all. Now we had kombucha on tap and a foosball table in the break room, but nobody could explain what a socket timeout really was. Rick thought uptime was optional. He said my team was set in our ways. He hinted that maybe I should think about early retirement, so he could bring in cloud-native talent to build something from scratch. From scratch. He had no idea what was actually under the hood. This system wasn't built clean. It was layered year after year, over bad decisions, vendor lock-ins, underfunded upgrades, and midnight patches that got us through brutal fiscal winters. My scripts weren't elegant, but they worked. They saved this company more than once. And I knew them all. Every line. Every server tag. Every hidden panic button. Every failover routine. Every messy little heartbeat that kept the whole thing breathing. I never complained. Not once. Even when the board passed me over for VP of Infrastructure and handed the job to some Stanford prodigy who lasted 6 months and left behind a broken container mesh and a $400,000 AWS bill. I just cleaned it up. Stayed late. Missed birthdays and holidays. Hell, I skipped my own 50th birthday so I could manually roll back a corrupted schema that would have cost us our contract with the state of Michigan. So when Rick stood in front of my team, my people, most of them trained by me, and said, "Some of these systems are ancient. We'll be phasing them out. And if you're not aligned with the new direction, well, maybe this isn't the place for you." I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just felt something inside me lock into place. 25 years. That's how long I'd carried this company on my back. Quietly. Invisibly. And in less than 30 seconds, this smug little startup clown tried to wipe out all of it with a dry erase marker and a cheap joke about legacy thinking. He didn't even look in my direction when he said it. He just kept talking to the new hires, already acting like I didn't exist. I stood up. Unplugged my charger. Shut my laptop. No long pause. No big speech. I gave the team one look. Slow. Steady. Quiet. Then I walked out. No one said a word. They didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew something had just shifted. Rick showed up to his first ops meeting like he was warming up for a TEDx stage. You could practically smell the cologne and buzzwords before he spoke. "We're going agile," he announced, clicking through a slide deck that looked like it had been thrown together by ChatGPT running on 4 hours of sleep. "Lean. Scalable. Future-focused. No more clinging to the past." He still didn't acknowledge me. Maybe he assumed the only woman in the room was there to take notes. Maybe he just didn't understand what happens when you bulldoze a system you've never bothered to learn. Either way, when the second slide popped up, sunsetting legacy systems, my stomach did a slow, heavy turn. My name wasn't on those systems, but they were mine. He kept rolling. We'll be reducing dependency on internally maintained infrastructure. These handcrafted solutions, he actually made air quotes, just aren't sustainable at scale. My jaw tightened. I'd spent 20 years making them sustainable when scale nearly crushed us. Any questions? He asked, that smug grin glued to his face. I raised my hand. Not high. Just enough to signal I wasn't about to be steamrolled. Yes, he squinted at me. Fran. Fiona, I said. He didn't apologize. I have a question about the systems on slide 3, I said evenly. Specifically the billing API, and how you plan to replicate the multi-tenant logic without the embedded rules engine I wrote. Oh, come on, Rick laughed, cutting me off mid-sentence. We're not going to keep building around stuff one person duct-taped together back in 2009. We're moving forward. And that means retiring the old dogs. Old dogs. His smile stretched wider. I'm sure you did some good work. But let's be real. If it was truly scalable, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, right? The room went tight. A few of the younger engineers stared at the table. One of my devs, Nate, looked like he was about to speak, but thought better of it. Rick leaned back in his ergonomic chair like he'd just solved world hunger. Look, I know change is hard, but maybe it's time to think about your next chapter. Retire with dignity. Let the tech move forward with people who know modern tools. I didn't blink. I just stared at him. 25 years, boiled down to a joke in a Canva deck. Then he said the line that snapped something clean in half. If you're unhappy, there's the door. You ever feel a moment crack you open from the inside? Like part of your soul packs its bags before your body even reacts? I didn't give him what he expected. No shouting. No anger. No scene. I stayed still and let the silence wrap around his words, tight and sharp like barbed wire. He filled it the way people like him always do. Moved on. Clicked ahead. Acted like nothing had happened. But something had. I hadn't just been insulted. I'd been erased. And that quiet he was so comfortable walking over? It was the last quiet he was ever going to get from me. What Rick didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that the code he mocked and the systems he planned to gut weren't actually theirs. Not legally. Not contractually. And definitely not in the eyes of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. He thought he was brushing dust off old tools. What he was really doing was kicking a loaded mine. He just hadn't stepped on it yet. It was just after 2 p.m. It was just after 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when I closed my laptop for the last time. Rick had already wandered off to one of his strategy sinks, leaving the bullpen filled with half-hearted typing and the soft ping of Slack notifications. That fake calm you get in the eye of a storm right before something gives. I stood up slowly like my body needed a second to catch up. 25 years of muscle memory told me to stay. To chase down the DNS hiccup I'd spotted in the logs. To finish the hotfix I'd started during lunch. But something colder, sharper, cut through all of that and reminded me I didn't owe them one more damn thing. I reached for my mug, the chipped ceramic one that read World's Okayest Engineer, with a permanent coffee ring burned into the bottom. I took one last sip of lukewarm sludge, then set it back on the desk like I was placing a marker on a grave. No one noticed. Nate was buried in a merge conflict. Lisa had her headphones on, whisper arguing with JavaScript. The new guy across from me, name started with a J, I think, was building a Docker container like it was a religious experience. Not a single head turned. Why would it? I'd been invisible for years. The veteran. The relic. The person you ran to when the servers were on fire and forgot about once the smoke cleared. Most of them probably figured I was just heading to the bathroom. I grabbed my coat. Not the branded fleece with the stitched logo and the Founders Circle 2010 badge they handed out like pity prizes at holiday parties. This was my real coat. Old black canvas. Broken zipper. Solder stains in the lining. The one I wore during 3 a.m. rewires in the snow. I tucked my laptop under my arm. My own laptop. The company issued one stayed right where it was. They could keep it. On my way out, I passed the wall. It was still there. Same frame. Same layer of dust. The photo of the original team, taken back when we believed this place meant something more than stock options and agile buzzwords. 15 of us standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the data center. My arm around Javier. Both of us smiling like idiots because we'd survived a power outage and an investor pitch on the same damn day. I stopped for a moment, looked at their faces. Javier, Priya, old Jack before his heart gave out. People who bled for this company. And now? Gone. Replaced. Erased with a marker. Sunset initiatives, Rick had called it. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad anymore. I felt clear. I turned, pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway. No announcement. No catch you later. Not even a goodbye Slack message. Let Rick make his statements. Let Slack fill up with forced surprise and half-baked, best of luck posts. I was already gone. What none of them knew, especially Rick, was that walking out wasn't the end of anything. It was the start. Because I hadn't just spent 25 years building systems for them. I'd spent the last 2 building something for myself. Quietly. Nights and weekends. Logging everything. Documenting everything. Filing everything. And none of it, not a single byte, belonged to them. They just hadn't realized it yet. Rick didn't waste any time. By the end of the week, he'd reassigned my entire portfolio to 3 junior devs and a so-called cloud architecture consultant, who looked like his Docker certification doubled as a Halloween costume. Slack was buzzing with shallow optimism. We've got this. Time to modernize. Meanwhile, the API logs were lighting up with timeouts and broken dependencies, flashing like warning panels on a dying spaceship. Me? I was in my garage. Not pacing. Not ranting. Just filing. I opened the folder on my external drive labeled Zenith Architecture Private and checked the timestamps one more time. Everything was exactly where it should be. Every commit, every diagram, every prototype server instance was there, versioned, archived, and watermarked with metadata so detailed it would make a forensic analyst either tear up with joy or crawl under a desk in shame. For the past 2 years, I'd been rebuilding their entire core framework under my own LLC, Bell Systems. Not a copy, not a spin-off, a clean parallel evolution. And I owned it. Some people knit to unwind. Me? I draft patents. And now the last one, the big one, was ready. The backbone of their billing engine. The routing logic. The session management layer that held everything together. It was finished and queued up for confirmation. The form was already complete. All that was left was one click. No lawyers yet. No press release. No noise. Just a single submission, and the United States Patent and Trademark Office would officially know what Rick didn't. That the system currently driving 62.4% of his operations, right down to the caching model and the handshake protocol, wasn't theirs. It was mine. You'd think a company obsessed with the word innovation would understand how IP law works. But like most startups drunk on jargon and cold brew, they forgot a basic truth. Not everything built around the company belongs to the company, especially when it's designed outside the scope of employment, maintained on personal time, and never formally assigned in a contract. Which mine wasn't. HR had tried, though. 6 years back, they slipped a revised NDA into a stack of paperwork, burying an ownership clause under something called Workflow Optimization Acknowledgement. I didn't sign it. I printed it out, highlighted the clause, and taped it to my fridge as a reminder. I kept receipts. Old ones. Email threads where I flat-out declined requests to move development onto company hardware. Jira tickets clearly labeled, personal project. Even a Slack message from the old CTO jokingly calling it, Fiona's Fortress. A nickname that aged better than he did. Rick, meanwhile, was busy scheduling team-building happy hours and throwing budget at a Kubernetes migration no one on his team fully understood. In his mind, I was a dinosaur. A relic who wandered off into the sunset mumbling about COBOL and punch cards. I wasn't extinct. I was evolving. And every move I made from here on out was surgical. No drama. No mess. Just quiet clinical precision. That's what you learn after watching guys like Rick come and go. Each one convinced they'd invented fire while dancing on gasoline-soaked floors. Click submit. 20 seconds later, the confirmation email landed in my inbox. Patent filing complete. Status. Pending final review. The last box on my checklist was officially checked. Soon the public listing would show the truth. No company name. No logo. Just mine. Matthew Bell. Independent inventor. Principal Bell Systems LLC. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I closed the laptop, took a sip of my coffee, and opened the next folder. Because now we were playing my game. It came in at 4:12 a.m., time-stamped with the kind of precision you only see in surgical strikes. Notice of allowance, United States Patent and Trademark Office. No confetti. No trumpet blast. Just a PDF and one polite sentence confirming what I already knew in my bones. Patent granted. The claims were tight. Narrow where they needed to be. Broad where it mattered. Every algorithm, every handshake protocol, every decision tree engine I'd written was wrapped in legal Kevlar. I barely had to scroll before I saw it, bold and undeniable. Applicant Matthew Bell. Asani Bell Systems LLC. Not a single mention of the company. Not in the header. Not in the footnotes. And definitely not in the ownership fields that actually counted. I leaned back in my chair. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the old desktop tower. I still ran out of principle. It had been a long time since I'd felt anything close to satisfaction. But there it was. Cold. Clean. Like steel being honed on a stone. I logged into the USPTO portal and updated the public record to match reality. Owner Bell Systems LLC. Primary inventor, Matthew Bell. Operational use license. None granted. Within 24 hours it would all be public. Searchable. Indexed. Visible to any due diligence team worth a damn. And wouldn't you know it, later that same morning, buried inside a relentlessly upbeat LinkedIn post, the startup's CEO announced they were officially launching their Series C round. Excited to share we're entering our next phase of growth. Big things ahead, he wrote, flashing that recycled headshot smile, completely unaware he'd just stepped into quicksand. I knew this dance. Series C meant scrutiny, deep dives, technical audits, architecture reviews, and best of all, IP due diligence. Investors don't wire $40 million into something they don't fully own. And when their team ran a basic IP search, they'd find me. Not a partial credit. Not co-developed with. Not a footnote. Just me. The same system they bragged about in pitch decks, demoed on conference stages, and built partnerships around. It lived on my servers first. Now it lived in my paperwork. Rick, of course, had no idea. Last I heard, he was busy planning swag bags for investor meetings. Branded notebooks. Reusable water bottles. Because nothing says enterprise-grade infrastructure like a bamboo thermos. I wasn't chasing applause. And this wasn't revenge. Not really. This was architecture. Calculated pressure. Controlled tension. Like slowly tightening a wrench around a bolt until it either loosens or snaps clean off. And it was starting to snap. Up to that point, everything was still quiet. No cease and desist letters. No legal threats. Just calm, verifiable proof that the engine running most of their operation wasn't legally attached to their balance sheet. I didn't need to knock on the door. The Series C team would do that for me. And when they finally asked, so who owns the core infrastructure? Rick wouldn't have an answer. But I would. I'd already written it. 3 words. License available. Inquire. They were about 40 minutes into the due diligence call when the first crack appeared. It started harmless. Standard investor checklist stuff. A partner from Linscott Capital asked for documentation confirming ownership of all proprietary technology. We just need a clear chain of title for the infrastructure IP, she said like she was ordering lunch. Routine. Required. No alarms yet. Rick, smiling in his Patagonia vest, replied, of course. All of our systems are internally developed. That's when legal shifted in their seats. One of the firm's attorneys, Rachel I think, muted her mic for a second to whisper to someone off-screen. Then came the sentence that mattered. We'll follow up shortly with the patent documentation. Rick missed it entirely. He kept talking. Product velocity. DevOps metrics. Something about quantifying resilience at scale. A full-blown buzzword scavenger hunt. Meanwhile, in another window inside a quiet breakout room, the startup's legal intern, poor kid, probably running on caffeine and panic, was staring at the USPTO website like it had just punched him in the chest. He ran the search twice just to be sure. Matthew Bell. Independent inventor. Bell Systems LLC. No company name. Anywhere. He checked the chain of ownership records. Nothing. No assignment. No transfer. No license. No shared rights. The signature line labeled, Authorized Representative of Employer Entity, sat empty. Untouched. The system wasn't accidentally unassigned. It was intentionally unclaimed. He slid the laptop across the table to senior legal. Their reaction wasn't loud. It was worse than anyone expected. Silence. The kind that settles in when something is deeply wrong and nobody wants to be the first one to say it out loud. Then Rachel unmuted her mic and said, a little too evenly, we're going to need to pause the current infrastructure IP review until we resolve a discrepancy. That's when Rick's smile finally slipped. Clarify what? He asked, his eyes tightening. A pause followed. Heavy. Loaded. We're seeing a conflicting ownership record in the USPTO database, Rachel said. The system appears to be registered under an independent entity. Bell Systems. Bell. Rick repeated. As in. Matthew Bell, yes, she confirmed. Someone coughed. Probably an intern. Someone else muttered a swear word and forgot to mute. Rick glanced off camera. No, that's not right. I mean, he built a version of it, sure, but that was part of our... Rachel cut him off. Respectfully, unless there's a signed IP assignment agreement on file, Investor Counsel will have to treat this as a material risk. Material risk. Those words hit like a pipe bomb in a server room, because they didn't mean we'll clean this up. They meant liability. They meant delays. They meant someone else owns your product and we might walk. Rick looked like someone had just read him his sentence. He mumbled something about checking old HR records, then tried pivoting to blame legacy processes for the oversight. But it was too late. The confidence drained out of his voice. His shoulders sagged. He wasn't presenting anymore. He was scrambling. The call wrapped early. Someone said, "We'll continue this discussion," which in investor language usually means, we're already halfway out the door. Inside the company, panic spread fast. Slack threads blew up. Legal pinged ops. Ops pinged finance. Someone tried calling the old CTO, who hadn't worked there in 4 years. And through all of it, one question kept resurfacing like a virus in the code base. Where the hell is Matt? And right behind it, why the hell didn't he sign? I slept like a corpse that night. First time in years I didn't dream about code rot, memory leaks, or some idiot pushing straight to prod without a rollback plan. Number 3 a.m. pager alerts. No phantom Slack vibrations. Just silence. Thick. Clean. When I finally rolled over and checked my phone, it lagged for a second trying to load the notifications. 243 missed calls. The first 90 were from numbers I didn't recognize. Burner lines. Temporary phones. Probably interns sent to test the water. Then came the real names. The company's general counsel, their outside firm, the CTO's old number. Someone still throwing a Hail Mary, and finally 12 voicemails from the founder himself. Most of them stamped between 2 o'clock and 5 a.m. Each one more frantic than the last. I played the final message on speaker while brushing my teeth. He wasn't yelling anymore. Just breathing hard, tripping over his words like a guy chasing a train that had already left the station. Matt, please call me back. We need to talk. This is urgent. The investors are asking questions we can't answer. Look, I didn't know. Nobody told me. Just call me, man. Please. I poured a cup of coffee. Let it sit. Watched the steam rise like a signal flare. I didn't touch the phone for another hour. When it rang again, I picked up. Once. No greeting. No hello. I let the silence stretch until he cracked. Why? The founder demanded, his voice tight and fraying. Does the ISPA list you as the owner? I let the question hang there. No rush. No reason to dress it up. Then I said it calm, steady, no heat behind it at all. Because I am. Click. I ended the call before he could choke out whatever half-formed threat or apology was lining up next. I'd spent 25 years waiting for someone in that building to finally ask who the hell I was. Now they knew. I didn't gloat. I didn't run to LinkedIn. I didn't leak call logs or write some smug blog post about lessons in ownership. That's Rick's style. Create a mess and try to meme your way out of it. Me? I already had what I needed. One patent. one LLC, and 243 voicemails that might as well have been prayers shouted at a locked server room. The system their entire empire ran on now had a different name stamped on it. Mine. And for the first time in years they were finally listening. The first offer showed up that same afternoon. Forwarded from a Gmail address I hadn't seen since 2015. Matt, let's talk. No subject line. No signature. Just desperation typed out at 4:48 p.m. I let it sit unread for 6 hours. Then I marked it unread again and walked away. You don't ignore someone for 5 years and then treat them like an emergency button. By nightfall they tried the carrot. This time it came from legal, copied to the founder and some junior VP I didn't recognize. The kind of email written with clenched teeth and bloodshot eyes. After internal discussions, we would be pleased to welcome you back to the team in a senior leadership capacity. We are open to renegotiating equity, stock options, and long-term incentives. I almost laughed out loud. A week earlier I was legacy clutter. Now I was critical leadership infrastructure. There was no mention of the patent. No mention of Bell Systems. Just glossy language about rebuilding trust and a collaborative future. They didn't want me back. They wanted what I owned. I replied the next morning. One sentence. I don't accept employment offers anymore, but licensing is available through Bell Systems LLC. 15 minutes later, the founder called. No shouting this time. Just raw, desperate math. Matt, we'll pay. Just tell me what you want. Let's not drag this out. I sent him the document. 6 pages. Clean. Ruthless. A formal licensing agreement. Tiered pricing based on usage volume. Enforced exclusivity within their market vertical. And one clause that wasn't up for discussion: mandatory oversight on all future architecture decisions, either by me or a Bell Systems appointed consultant. Not a courtesy. Not a suggestion. A requirement. I wasn't stepping back into that building to be ignored, talked over, or erased. If they wanted the system, they were buying the map, and I was the one drawing it now. The founder didn't argue. There wasn't much room to. He signed 2 days later. Rick was gone by Friday. Mutual parting of ways, the press release said. Around town, the story was that he tried to defend himself. Said something like, "It's just a licensing issue. It's fixable." It wasn't. Not when the system at the center of your Series C depended on someone who no longer answered your Slack messages. Not when the engineer you tried to push out now billed by the hour and controlled your roadmap from a cabin in the mountains. I didn't message the team. Didn't post some half-baked manifesto about justice or revenge. I filed the contract. Backed it up in 3 different places. I logged the signature ID into my own system and tagged it exactly what it was. Recovered asset. Zenith Core. Then I poured myself a drink. That's the thing about revenge. You don't always need fire. Sometimes all it takes is paperwork. And a pen only you control. The boardroom felt colder than I remembered. They'd remodeled since I left. Everything was sleeker now. All glass and polished ego. Matte black chairs that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi tribunal. No one met my eyes when I walked in. Not legal. Not the investors. And definitely not the founder, who sat hunched over his iPad like it might magically save him. It didn't. The licensing packet sat in the center of the table. Thick. Final. 6 sets of initials already in place. 1 signature left. Investor counsel leaned forward and flipped to the last page. We're aligned on all terms as discussed. Nothing revised from Bell Systems. My lawyer shook her head. No changes. Final terms stand. Silence. Then the soft click of a pen. The partner from Linscott Capital, the same one who'd spotted the missing assignment clause during diligence, signed with a slow, deliberate stroke. That was it. The final signature they needed to stay alive. She slid the folder across the table. At the bottom, printed in clean, merciless block letters. Licensor. Matthew Bell, founder and principal, Bell Systems LLC. A younger engineer, late 20s, maybe, leaned toward a product manager and whispered, "So, who is this guy again?" The founder didn't look up. Didn't lift his pen. Just stared at the tabletop and muttered, like it physically hurt to say it. "He's the reason we're still in business." There was no applause. No handshake. The founder didn't even stand when I did. I nodded once to legal, slipped my copy of the agreement into my briefcase, and walked out. I didn't look back. 10 minutes later, I was on a train heading out of the city, sunlight flooding through the windows like it hadn't in years. I opened a fresh laptop. New machine. No company stickers. No ghost directories. Just a blinking cursor waiting. Bell Systems wasn't a shell anymore. It was real. Funded. Mine. And now? Now it had leverage. Across the street, in a coffee shop with the worst Wi-Fi I'd ever paid $6 to tolerate, I opened a new shell session and deployed the first container for something different. Something better. Not revenge. Not spite. Legacy. Built clean. Built right. Built mine. Back at the office, they were still chewing on the clause on page 4, the one that required biannual architecture reviews by a Bell Systems engineer. The new hire they'd brought in to replace me? He'd be spending a lot of his time answering our questions now. And somewhere deep in their system logs, a new status flag had appeared. System active licensed use confirmed. No explosions. No drama. Just permanence. Written in ink. Sealed on paper. And signed by the last name they never thought they'd need again.